The factory floor at Sterling Precision was quiet, in a way no working machine shop should ever be. 6 hours of silence around a $4 million 5-axis CNC, the red fault lights blinking like a slow heartbeat. 3 engineers in Hellman Brecht polos closed their laptops. The lead one shook his head. Margot Sterling stood under the overhead lamps and said the sentence she had been holding for an hour. Even the manufacturer can't fix this. The garage door rolled up. A man walked in. Flannel shirt, worn steel toolbox. He set the box down and tapped his phone. 4 minutes counted down on the screen. And knelt. If a quiet man being underestimated until the moment he is not is your kind of story, tap the like and the subscribe before this one starts. It costs nothing and tells us to keep telling them. The phone had rung 90 minutes before any of that. In a one-bay garage off Wade Hampton Boulevard in Greer. The old neon sign reading Halloran Repair flickering in the early dark. Knox Halloran had a wet rag in one hand and a leaf blower carburetor in the other when the line lit up. Asher sat on the workbench stool with his sneakers swinging 6 inches above the concrete floor, drawing a single-stage axial turbine in a notebook far too good for an 8-year-old. He looked up when his father picked up. Knox. Ezra Bramwell's voice. Lower than usual. Machine 2 is down at Sterling. Hard lockout. They flew the Stuttgart crew in 12 hours ago. They can't get past it. Knox set the carburetor down. I'm out, Ez. I know you are. I would not be calling if it were anyone else. Send them the seed. It's in the safe at your house. They've tried 4 protocols. None of them are the right shape. It is not a key it is taking. It is your hand. Knox closed his eyes. He could see the panel he had drawn at 31, sitting on the floor of an apartment in Stuttgart with Sarah's feet in his lap. The bearing protection routine had been her idea, in a way. She had asked him one night why factories sounded so violent. He had built her a thing that refused to scream. There's a Boeing order on it, Ezra said. Charleston facility. 36 hours. The woman running Sterling didn't deserve to inherit a sinking floor. Knox looked at his son. Asher had stopped drawing. Dad? 1 hour, bud. I'm walking you to Mrs. Henley's. Mrs. Henley lived 2 doors down. She had been Sarah's friend before she had been Knox's, which mattered. She opened the screen door in her slippers without surprise, took the boy's hand, and looked at Knox once over the rim of her glasses. Engineering business? Engineering business. You haven't done engineering business in 3 years. I know. She did not say anything else. She closed the door behind Asher and Knox heard the television come on, low, the way she always kept it for him. He walked back to the truck. The pickup was an 18-year-old Silverado with a long bed cap. The paint sanded down on one fender where Asher had once dragged a tricycle. The toolbox in the back was the same one Knox had carried out of Hellman Brecht the day he resigned. Inside it, nothing exotic. Calipers, a snap, on torque wrench, a custom machine diagnostic dongle no one else in the world could have used, and a small USB drive on a steel keyring. The Sterling lobby was glass and brushed steel and smelled like air-conditioned anxiety. The receptionist looked at the flannel. Ezra appeared behind her in his security director's quarter zip and waved Knox through without a word. Margot Sterling was waiting at the floor entry, not in heels, sneakers under a charcoal blazer, hair tied back. The exhaustion sat on her like a coat she could not take off. You're the favor Ezra called in. Apparently, 3 Stuttgart techs are inside. They've been telling me for 6 hours that it is a hardware lockout and there is no firmware override. They're right. It isn't a firmware lockout. She studied him, did not press, pushed the door open and walked him onto the floor. Stefan Kraus, the lead Hellman Brecht engineer, looked up when Knox crossed under the overhead lamps. He frowned at the flannel, then frowned harder at the toolbox, then said something to the man next to him in German, low and quick. Knox did not look up. He set the box down. He pulled out his phone and tapped the timer. 4 minutes. He knelt. Knox did not enter service mode. The Hellman Brecht techs had been trying for 6 hours to reach the service partition, and that had been their first mistake. There was no way in from there, by design. The bearing lockout he had built lived above the operating system. It answered only to one input. He opened the diagnostic panel under the spindle head. The small port behind the second cooling line was unmarked on every schematic Hellman Brecht had ever printed. He slid the steel keyring off his belt and plugged the USB dongle in. The screen above the operator station went dark for a heartbeat, Then a single prompt came up in white text on black font monospace, German label, English subfields, bearing protection override. Operator credential required. Knox typed a string of 64 characters from memory. The cursor blinked once. The prompt cleared. A new menu opened, clean and structured, in the unmistakable engineering hand of a man who had built it once and never needed to change it. The header read Halloran Override. Stefan Kraus stepped closer to read it. He read it twice. His face changed. He said something to the engineer beside him in German, low and quick. Margot was standing 8 feet behind. She had taken 2 semesters of German at Vanderbilt. It had been almost 15 years. She still caught the phrase that mattered. He designed it himself. She did not say anything. Not yet. Knox reset 4 parameters. He recalibrated the bearing alignment compensation to factory floor. He closed the override and pulled the dongle. The screen returned to the operator interface. He started the machine. The spindle climbed. 8,000, 12, 16, 18,000 RPM. The bearing temperature held green. The diagnostic dashboard reported no faults. The timer on his phone read 3 minutes 47 seconds. He picked up his toolbox. Stefan Kraus crossed the floor to him. The other 2 German engineers had already started packing. Stefan held out a hand. He did not say anything in English. He just nodded once and said the name as if he had practiced it. Halloran. Knox shook the hand. He did not smile. Margot watched the exchange. Watched the Germans pack their cases with a speed that was not normal. Watched Ezra Bramwell, standing by the far door, with his hand resting on his radio in a way that told her he had known this was coming for a long time. She walked Knox to the cashier's office to send the invoice. He gave her his standard rate, 3 hours of labor, $480. She wrote the check. She did not say thank you. She said, "I have questions, Mr. Halloran. I figured they'll keep until morning. That works for me." He left through the loading dock. The pickup pulled out into the early dark. Margot stood in the empty hallway with the check in her hand and watched the brake lights at the gate. Behind her, Ezra stepped up quietly. "Don't push him tonight." "I wasn't going to." She walked back to her office and opened a browser and typed Knox Halloran Engineer. 2 results came up. A keynote from 2017 at Hanover. A patent assignment from 2019. Nothing else. She closed the laptop, picked up her keys, drove home with the radio off. That night, in the small house in Greer, Knox lifted his sleeping son from the truck and carried him to bed. He sat on the floor by the bed for a long time, not moving. He thought about a woman in a green dress in the front row at Hanover, her hand on her stomach, her smile. He had not let himself think about her face in 7 months. Boeing's quality control cleared the lot at 6:51 in the morning. Margot got the call in her car, on the gravel drive of her own house, with the engine off and a cold cup of yesterday's coffee in the cup holder. Boeing thanked her. The man on the line did not know how close the company had come. She drove to Greer. She had the address. She had had the address since the night before. Halloran Repair was a single bay with a hand-painted wood sign and a gravel lot that fit 4 cars. Knox was inside, sleeves rolled, the front panel off a washing machine. An older woman sat on a folding chair with a small dog in her lap, watching him work. Asher was at the counter, dipping a spoon into cereal. Margot stayed in the doorway. Knox did not look up. "Mr. Halloran, Mrs. Sterling, you overcharged me yesterday. I undercharged you." She walked in and put a check on the workbench. She had written a new one. The line under amount read $50,000. He looked at it. He picked up a pen from the bench. He drew a line through the amount and wrote 480 in the margin, and signed his initials beside it. He pushed it back. "Margot, take it back, or I tear it." She took it back. The old woman said, "Mr. Halloran, you'll never be rich at this rate," in a way that suggested she had been saying it for years. "That's the plan, Mrs. Henley." Asher looked up from the cereal. "Are you the lady from the factory?" Margot crouched without thinking, putting herself at his height. The blazer caught on her elbow. She did not fix it. "I am. Your dad helped me yesterday. He fixes things." Asher said it the way another boy might say the sky is blue. "Want to see my notebook?" She stayed 40 minutes. Asher walked her through a 4-bar linkage. He drew her a single-stage compressor on a napkin. He explained why turboprops were better than turbofans for short fields. She did not pretend to be patient. She asked real questions. He gave her real answers. Knox watched from behind the open hood of a riding mower and tried not to watch. When Margot stood, her knees hurt and she did not mind. She walked to where Knox was working and stood on the opposite side of the mower. "There's a diner on Pleasantburg, the one with the booths. Tomorrow at 6, you and Asher. Not a thank you dinner. Just dinner." Knox did not answer for a moment. "I won't ask you anything you don't want to answer," she said. "That helps. I'll be there at 6. If you come, you come." She walked out. Knox heard the Range Rover door close and the engine start. Asher behind him said, "Are we going, Dad?" Knox set down the wrench. He looked at the doorway where the Range Rover had been. He looked at his son. "Yeah, bud, we're going." Across town, in his corner office at Sterling Precision, Roderick Mace was running facial recognition software on a still frame from the night before. The frame matched, with a confidence of 89%, a face from the cover of a German trade magazine published in late 2017. He smiled. He picked up his encrypted phone. The diner on Pleasantburg had red booths and a coffee maker that had been pouring since before any of them were born. Margot got there at 5:58. Knox and Asher came in at 6:04. Asher ordered pancakes for dinner without checking with anyone. Margot ordered the same. Knox ordered a club sandwich and ate half of it. She told them about her father. He had built Sterling Precision out of one garage in 1983. He had died at his desk in the spring of 2022, on a Tuesday afternoon, and she had taken the chair the following Monday and had not slept properly since. Knox told a careful version of his own life. He had started a small engineering shop in Charlotte in 2013 with a man named Ezra Bramwell. They had been acquired by a German firm in 2015. He had left the company in 2022 for personal reasons. He had been fixing washing machines in Greer for 3 years. He did not say her name. He did not say cancer. He let the spaces hold what he could not. Asher leaned across the table and asked Margot what a CEO actually did. She thought about it. Mostly say no to things, so other people can say yes. He nodded like he had been told something useful. He asked her if she had a dad too. She said she did, and that he had died 2.5 years ago. Asher considered that for a moment. He said, "My mom died. So you and my dad both had something happen." Margot did not look at Knox. She nodded slowly at Asher and said, "Yes, we did." Knox set his coffee cup down on the table and did not pick it up again for a while. She had brought him a present, even though she had not announced it. It was a soft leather notebook from her father's bottom desk drawer, the inside cover stamped with his initials, Engineering Quadrille, 80 pages, untouched. Asher held it like it might break. When they walked out into the parking lot, the air had turned. November in upstate South Carolina meant the cold came in late and arrived all at once. Asher climbed into the pickup. Knox closed the door and stood by the driver's side. Margot stayed a step away. She tilted her head up at the sodium lamp above them. "Knox, I watched the Hanover keynote last night. The recording is still on the Trade Association archive." He did not say anything. Sarah was in the front row. She wore green. "You looked at her once in the middle of the slide on bearing geometry. You said my partner instead of my wife. I don't know why I noticed that, because that's what she was. I won't bring it up again until you do. Thank you." She got in her car and drove home without the radio on. That night, in his living room, Knox opened his laptop for the first time in 6 months. He typed Margot Sterling. He read about her Wharton MBA. He read about the supply chain crises she had carried Sterling through. He read a small profile from the Greenville Journal that quoted her saying she wanted to keep her father's people employed for the next 40 years. He closed the laptop. He looked at the photograph of Sarah on the mantel. He spoke to her the way he sometimes did when Asher was asleep and the house was quiet. "Sarah, I think I'm in trouble." The photograph did not change. He did not expect it to. But he stood there a long time before he turned off the lamp. Asher turned 9 on a Saturday in mid-November. Knox had not told Margot the date. Asher had on the phone 2 days before. She came at 4 in the afternoon with a small box, wrapped in brown paper, and a card Asher could read by himself. Inside the box was a 6-inch Mitutoyo digital caliper, the model the boy had said at the diner he wanted when he was older. He opened it. He held it the way another child might hold a puppy. Then he hugged her around the waist for 9 full seconds. Knox stood in the kitchen doorway with a wooden spoon and a mixing bowl and did not say anything. Ezra was there too. He had not been to the house since the funeral. He stood in the corner with a paper plate and watched the boy with an expression Knox had not seen on his old partner's face in a long time. After cake, after the 2 boys from Asher's class went home, after Mrs. Henley took Asher upstairs to read him to sleep, the 3 adults stayed in the kitchen. Ezra pulled a USB drive out of his shirt pocket and set it on the table. "Margot, I've been watching Roderick Mace for 3 months." She looked at the drive. She looked at Ezra. She looked at Knox. "You knew?" "I just found out tonight," Knox said. "Why tonight?" she asked Ezra. "Because Roderick is going to come at Knox on Monday morning to bury his own tracks. And I needed both of you in the same room when I gave you what I have," he told her. Roderick had been selling Sterling's proprietary tooling specifications to a competitor called Briggs Industries for the past 14 months. Wire transfers through a shell company in Delaware, a pattern of late-night data transfers from the engineering server when Roderick worked alone. Estimated lost revenue, $8 million. The FBI Columbia field office had a copy of everything as of 10 days earlier. Margot sat in the chair and held the USB without moving for a long time. "He's going to use Knox to do it. He's going to try." She looked up at Knox. "What does he have on you?" "Enough to make it look bad if you don't already know the whole story." "Then I should know the whole story before Monday." "You will." She left near midnight. Knox walked her out. They stood on the porch in their coats. The streetlight at the corner buzzed. "Knox." "Yeah. I'm not asking you anything tonight. I'm telling you that Monday will be the worst meeting of my career, and I'd like you in it. I'll be there. Bring Ezra." "I will." She drove home. Inside the house, Ezra was washing a plate at the kitchen sink. He did not turn around when Knox came back in. "You did right by her," Knox said. "I did right by you. She just happens to be in the same direction." Knox stood in the doorway. He looked at the leftover cake on the counter. He looked at the photograph of Sarah and 3-year-old Asher on the refrigerator that had been there for 6 years. "She asked me about Sarah on Wednesday," Ezra said. "I told her you loved your wife. I told her your wife would have liked her." "You didn't ask me first." "No, I didn't." Knox picked up a dish towel and started drying the plates Ezra was rinsing. "Sarah would have liked her," Knox said after a while. "I know," Ezra said. "That's why I told her." They finished the dishes without talking. Ezra dried his hands on the towel. He put on his coat in the hallway. At the door he stopped. "Knox, on Monday morning, when Roderick puts your picture on the screen and tells the board you are a problem, don't speak unless Margot looks at you." "I won't. And when she does, I'll confirm." "Good." Ezra left. The boardroom at Sterling Precision had been built to intimidate suppliers in 1991. 12 chairs, a long table, glass walls on 3 sides. On Monday morning at 8:02, 7 board members and 1 outside counsel sat around it. Margot took the head chair. She did not open her laptop. Roderick Mace stood at the projector. He had called the emergency session. He had prepared the deck. His tie was a quiet navy. The first slide was a photograph of Knox Halloran from 2017, in a suit, at a podium under the Hellman Brecht logo. Mrs. Sterling, without disclosure to this board, brought a former Hellman Brecht chief design engineer onto our floor 4 nights ago. Mr. Halloran's non-compete clause from his Hellman Brecht employment is enforceable until 2029. If Boeing's audit team discovers the source of the repair, our contract is voided. If Hellman Brecht discovers it, we face litigation. I move that this board place Mrs. Sterling on administrative leave pending external investigation and appoint me as interim chief executive. The oldest board member, a man named Cal Whitfield, who had known Margot's father for 40 years, looked at her. "Mrs. Sterling, your response." Margot did not stand up. "Ezra, Knox, please come in." The door opened. Ezra Bramwell walked in first. Knox followed. Knox stood by the empty chair at the foot of the table. He did not sit. Margot nodded once at Ezra. Ezra placed a folder on the table. "Before we discuss Mr. Halloran, the board needs to see this." He worked a laptop. The screen shifted from Knox's photograph to a wire transfer log, to a server access log, to a piece of video from a small camera in the engineering department, time-stamped 2:17 in the morning on a Thursday in early October. The video showed Roderick Mace transferring data from the proprietary tooling server to a personal USB drive. He did it without hurry. He had clearly done it many times before. The room was very quiet. Ezra spoke evenly. Mr. Mace has been selling Sterling's proprietary aerospace tooling specifications to Briggs Industries for 14 months. The FBI's Columbia field office has had this material since the 17th of last month. I held the copy for the board because Mrs. Sterling asked me to give her control of when this came to light. Roderick's face did not move. His mouth opened slightly. That is fabricated. Sit down, Roderick, Margot said, without raising her voice. He sat down. Ezra placed a second folder beside the first. Now, on Mr. Halloran. His non-compete with Hellman Brecht applies to direct competition in 5-axis tooling manufacture. It does not apply to one-time field service for a customer. More importantly, he opened the folder. United States Patent, number 10. 847392. Bearing Protection, Override Protocol. Issued in 2019. Sole inventor and assignee, Knox Halloran. Hellman Brecht has been paying Mr. Halloran a quarterly licensing royalty for the past 7 years. He did not enter this facility as a former employee of the manufacturer. He entered it as the patent holder of the technology that fixed your machine. Cal Whitfield turned to Knox. Mr. Halloran, can you confirm? I confirm it. Margot looked at Roderick across the table. Security is at the door. 2 FBI agents are downstairs. You can walk out, or you can be walked out. Roderick stood up. He did not look at anyone. He walked out. The door closed. After a long pause, Cal Whitfield said, Mrs. Sterling, we owe you an apology. You can owe me lunch. In the hallway after, Margot and Knox stood by the window at the end of the corridor. She did not look at him. Sarah sat in the front row at Hanover because she was 4 months pregnant, and you didn't want her on her feet. How did you know? Ezra told me on Wednesday. She turned and looked at him then. I want to know you, Knox, not the engineer. You. I don't know where to start. Start with Asher. Knox started with Asher because Margot had told him to. She came to the garage that night at 9:18. Asher was asleep on the office sofa under a plaid wool blanket. The shop smelled of clean oil and cold coffee and the dust that gathered on the inside of every garage in upstate South Carolina in November. Margot wore a cable-knit sweater and jeans and no makeup. She had brought 2 paper cups of coffee from the place on East Poinsett. She handed him one, and they stood by the hood of the pickup. I read your patent last night, she said. All of it? All of it. The abstract, the annexes, the licensing addendum. He waited. You named it Sarah's lock in the internal documentation. Hellman Brecht asked you to take her initials out of the abstract before filing. You took them out of the filing. You put them back in the addendum, where no one would read it but a lawyer. He set the coffee down on the fender. Knox. You designed a safety lock on a $4 million machine, and you named it after your wife. 4 months before she was diagnosed. I knew before she did. She looked at him. I found the biopsy report in the laundry basket. She had been hiding it for 11 days. The hospital called to confirm her appointment for the chemo intake. I picked up the phone. She had been waiting until I finished the patent to tell me. I walked out of the office that afternoon. Knox. She wanted me to finish it. So I finished it. The filing date is the same week she started chemo. I built her one thing that does not fail. The machine is still running. She isn't. Margot did not say anything for a long time. She put her hand on the hood of the pickup. Not on him. On the metal beside his hand. The metal was cold. I'm sorry I read it. I'm glad you did. Asher murmured on the sofa and turned over. The blanket slid. Knox crossed the bay and pulled it back over his son's shoulder. He stood by the sofa for a moment. He came back. I'm 36, Margot said. I've had 2 relationships in my adult life, and neither of them ended because of love. I don't know what I am doing here. Sarah was the first for me. I thought she was going to be the last. I had decided that. I had been living that for 3 years. And now I don't know. She picked up her coffee. She did not drink it. She held it with both hands. Okay. She did not move to touch him. He did not move to touch her. They stood on opposite sides of the hood of a 15-year-old pickup with a sleeping child 6 feet away. and they let the silence say what neither of them was ready to say with words. After a while, she put the coffee down on the workbench. "I'm going home, Knox." "Okay. Thank you for the coffee." "You brought the coffee." "I know." She walked out. The Range Rover started up. The headlights swept the wall of the garage once and were gone. Knox stood by the pickup for a long time. He looked at the coffee cup on the workbench. He picked it up. The cup was still warm. He carried his son to the truck and drove home. He sat on the floor by Asher's bed until almost 2 in the morning. He did not cry. He did not pray. He just sat. Outside the bedroom window, the street light on Wade Hampton flickered the way it had been flickering since the fall before Sarah died. 2 months later, the cold had settled into the Carolinas the way cold does there, slowly, with damp mornings and a low gray light that made every parking lot feel like the same parking lot. December dragged into January. Roderick Mace pled out on federal industrial espionage and wire fraud charges and named 4 other contractors in his plea agreement. Sterling Precision received a commendation from the Department of Defense for cooperation. The Boeing contract renewed at a higher volume. Knox and Margot were not dating in any way Asher could see, and not in any way they had named out loud. She stopped by the garage 3 times a week with coffee. She came to a soccer game in early December and stood on the sideline with a thermos and did not hug anyone when the team won. She came to a soccer game 2 weeks later when the team lost, and she sat in the back of the pickup with Asher for 10 minutes while Knox loaded the cleats into the cab. Asher called her Margot. He had asked Knox in the truck one night, on the way home from a movie, what he was supposed to call her. Knox had said, "Whatever feels right, bud. Take your time." Asher had taken his time. The name he picked was the one she already had. There was a Tuesday in mid-December when Margot called Knox at 9 in the evening from her office. She had been there since 7 that morning. She did not have a reason for calling. "What are you doing?" "Reading him a book about Lockheed." "Which one?" "Skunk Works. He's 9. He's reading the parts that have diagrams." She was quiet for a moment. "Knox, some days I am very tired." "I know. Are you tired?" "Most days." "Okay." That was the whole call. She hung up first. He stayed on the line for a few seconds after, the way he had when Sarah used to call from the office in Stuttgart and forget what she had called about. She invited them to her house outside Greenville for the first time in early January. It was a 2-story timber frame on 5 acres, a house her father had built for her mother when Margot was 11. Knox stood in the kitchen and looked at the high beams and did not say anything for a while. Asher found the piano in the front room. He played the one song he knew, the Twinkle variation, badly. Margot sat on the bench beside him and helped him with the left hand. After Asher fell asleep on the couch under a throw blanket, Margot and Knox sat on the long porch under a propane heater. The sky was clear. There was no moon. "I asked Hellman Breck to credit you publicly on Sarah's lock," Margot said. "On their corporate site, under the patent listing." They agreed. "It goes live next month." He did not answer right away. "I did it for Asher," she added. "So when he Googles his father, he sees enough." He looked at her. The porch heater hummed. She did not look back. "Margot. You did it for me." "Yes." He took her hand. He did not pull her closer. He just took her hand and held it on the arm of the chair between them. They sat that way for a long time. Later that night, driving back to Greer in the pickup with Asher sleeping in the back seat, Knox pulled the truck onto the shoulder of the empty county road, just past the river. He put the hazards on. He sat with both hands on the wheel for half a minute. Then he leaned forward and rested his forehead against the steering wheel and let his shoulders shake once. He sat up. He wiped his face with his sleeve. He put the truck in gear. In the back seat, Asher slept on, his head tipped against the window. Knox drove the last 12 miles home. In early February, Margot asked Knox to come to her office. He came in jeans and a clean flannel, which was the closest he came to dressing for a meeting. The receptionist who had looked sideways at him the first night did not look up this time. Margot's assistant walked him in. There was a contract on her desk. It was 32 pages. She let him read it without speaking. It was a consulting agreement. One product. A new 5-axis tooling cell for domestic aerospace, designed for small-run high-precision work. 18 months, he would work out of his garage in Greer. He would come to Sterling only when he wanted to. Sterling would pay him $1.4 million in milestones. He looked up. "Are you doing this for me or for the company?" "Both." The board approved it on Tuesday. I would not have proposed it if I did not need it. I would not have proposed it for someone I did not want it for. He read it again. He turned to the signature page. One condition. 2 names on the patent, mine and Asher's. He's been drawing spindle layouts on napkins since he was 7. He earned a credit line. She smiled. He had not seen her smile without a weight behind it before. Done. He signed. She signed. She came around the desk. She did not sit on the edge of it. She walked over to where he was standing and she put her forehead against his forehead. 1 second. 2. Margot. Come have dinner with us tonight. Yes. She walked him to the elevator. The doors opened. He stepped in. She did not step in with him. The doors closed. He stood in the elevator looking at the brushed steel of the closed doors for 4 floors. That night, Asher made spaghetti with sauce from a jar, and Knox made a salad, and Margot brought a bottle of red wine that none of them drank, because Knox did not drink, and Margot was driving, and Asher was 9. The wine sat on the counter. Asher told Margot about a project his class was doing on engineers in the family. He asked her if she counted as family. She did not answer right away. She looked at Knox. Knox did not answer for her. She said, "I'd like to." Asher considered that. He nodded. He went back to the spaghetti. A few minutes later, while Margot was carrying plates to the sink, Asher leaned across the table to his father and said, in the deliberate undertone of a child who knows he is being heard, "Dad, you should marry her." Knox did not answer. He picked up the salad bowl and walked it to the kitchen. Margot was at the sink with her back to them. She did not turn around. The water ran for a long time. Knox put his hand on the counter next to Margot's. The backs of their hands touched. They did not move. Later, after Asher was asleep, Margot stood by the front door with her coat on. Knox stood 3 feet from her. "I'm going to drive home now," she said. "Okay. I'll probably drive home for another 6 months. And then I'm going to stop driving home." "Okay. That's a plan. That's a plan." She opened the door. The cold came in. She went out. Knox closed the door. He stood with his hand on the wood for a moment. Then he went upstairs. A year later, in February of 2028, the sign over the garage read Halloran and Son Repair. Knox had added a second bay in October. Asher, 10, was rebuilding a leaf blower carburetor under his father's eye with a torque wrench that fit his hand. He still had glasses. He had grown 2 inches. Margot had sold the timber frame in Greenville the previous autumn. She had bought a small clapboard house 1¼ miles from Halloran Repair. She had not moved in with Knox. They had decided, both of them, that they would do this in the order the boy could keep up with. Asher had switched himself to Greer Elementary in October without being asked. He had a friend across the street named Wyatt who had 4 dogs. The consulting work for Sterling had finished its first stage. Boeing had placed a $28 million pre-order on the new cell. Knox's name was on the patent. Asher's name was on the patent. Asher had taken the patent certificate to school for show and tell in November, and his teacher had cried, quietly, while reading the inventor's line. Sarah's lock had been publicly credited on the Hellman Brecht site for 11 months. Knox had received a handwritten letter from Sarah's mother in Stuttgart in April. He kept it folded in the toolbox. Ezra had retired in January with a small ceremony at Sterling. Knox had spoken at it. He had not spoken in public since Hanover. Asher had stood at his side the whole time. On a Saturday afternoon in mid-February, Margot came to the garage for lunch. They ate sandwiches at the workbench. After, she carried the plates to the small sink in the back room to wash them. Knox walked Asher to the 3rd drawer of the rolling toolbox. "Today's the day, bud?" "Today's the day." Asher opened the drawer. Among the 10mm sockets and the spare cotter pins was a small black ring box. He took it out. He gave it to his father. Margot came back drying her hands on a shop rag. She stopped when she saw them. Knox did not kneel. He just stood and held out the box. "I'm not great at this part. I made the ring. Took me 6 months." Asher helped with the polish. She opened the box. The band was matte silver, plain except for one word engraved on the inside. Knox had forged it from a strip of bearing steel out of the first patent run. The word was stay. She looked at him. She looked at Asher. Asher nodded the small, steady nod of a kid who had been told to count and had been counting it correctly. Yes. She did not say anything else. She did not need to. Knox stepped forward and put his arms around her. Asher waited 3 seconds, the way he had been told, and then he stepped in and put his arms around both of them. Outside the open bay door, the sun dropped behind the Blue Ridge. Inside the garage, the wrench Knox had set down on the bench stayed where he had left it. 3 people stood together. The work could wait.